The housing market in the United States, UK and Europe is in turmoil, marked by soaring prices and an alarming shortage of affordable homes. This crisis, which has been escalating since the 1980s, now sees even the middle class struggling to secure housing. Young people, in particular, are burdened with high rents, student loans, and inaccessible mortgages. A common scapegoat for these issues is immigration. Politicians and experts frequently claim that immigrants and asylum seekers strain social services and inflate housing demand, leading to higher prices and fewer affordable options for long-time residents. They argue that immigrants receive special treatment while regular taxpayers shoulder the costs. In the US, similar concerns arise over illegal immigrants and their impact on public services like education and healthcare. Figures such as Donald Trump have characterized illegal immigrants as low-skilled workers who drain resources without contributing taxes. Many politicians assert that limiting the influx of low-skilled workers and refugees is necessary to protect social security, healthcare, and housing for citizens. They contend that this competition exacerbates rent increases and home prices, further marginalizing individuals and families and contributing to the rise in homelessness. But how accurate is this perspective? The truth is more complex, involving a myriad of factors beyond immigration. The real roots of the housing crisis lie in policy decisions, economic trends, and urban planning. To truly address these issues, we must look beyond easy scapegoats and confront the systemic causes driving the housing market's instability. Are immigrants the cause of housing market crises? Many think they are, but there's no proof. The truth is that immigrants are not the cause of the housing crises in the US, UK, and Europe. This is a complex issue with many factors involved. However, the idea that immigrants are taking housing away from others is a misconception. The real issues in the housing market are related to policy decisions, economic factors, and how we plan and build our cities, not who is moving into the country. In the Netherlands, social housing went from 44% of all housing in 1992 to just 3% in 2012. Urban geographer Cody Hochstenbach explains in his book that the Dutch housing crisis is due to government policies that pushed home ownership. These policies led to the privatization of social housing, cuts to subsidies for housing cooperatives, and removal of tenant protections and rent controls. Because of this, house prices and rents in the private sector soared. Now there are 100,000 homeless people in the Netherlands, and homeowners are much richer than renters. Between 2013 and 2020, the total housing stock in the Netherlands grew by 5.9%. If social housing had grown at the same rate, there would be 245,000 more social rental homes. Instead, social housing actually decreased by 115,000 units, a drop of 5.3%. The decline in Dutch social housing happened because of the sale, demolition, and privatization of social housing, along with a big slowdown in building new social housing. In the early 1980s, Dutch cooperatives built 60,000 to 70,000 new homes each year. But between 2009 and 2013, they only built 27,000 homes a year, and even fewer, 15,000 homes a year, from 2014 to 2019. If they had kept building at the 2009-2013 rate, there would be 82,000 more homes now. In 2015, 224,000 social housing units were available for new tenants, but by 2020, that number had dropped to 163,000, a 27% decrease in just 5 years. Over the years, 15,000 social homes have been given to refugees, which is about 9% of all empty houses. This percentage has gone up, but it's not because more refugees are taking homes from Dutch tenants. Instead, the total number of social houses has decreased quickly. While things are bad in the Netherlands, it is even worse in the UK. Starting in 1980, the government, led by Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, encouraged people to buy social housing at low prices. This was part of the Right to Buy programme, which aimed to create a society where more people owned homes. This policy was continued by later governments and added to the problem by allowing people to buy more than one house to rent out. During this time, the government also cut funding for building new social housing. After World War II, they used to build between 169,000 and 245,000 council houses each year. By 1979, the year Thatcher was elected, they only built 86,000. This number kept dropping and reached a record low in 2004, when only 130 social housing units were built. As a result, the total number of social housing units dropped from 6.5 million in 1979 to around 2 million in 2017. The sale of social housing and the decline in new housing construction, combined with high real estate prices, made it hard for people without homes to find affordable places to live. In 2000, the average house in England cost 4 times the average annual salary. By 2021, it had cost 8 times the average annual salary. Young people who couldn't buy their own homes and couldn't get social housing had to pay high rents in the private sector. High rents made it hard to save money for a mortgage down payment, creating a vicious cycle where affordable housing became almost impossible for many millennials who wanted to buy a home but couldn't afford it. This led to more people struggling with high housing costs and even becoming homeless. In the US, social housing has always been less common compared to other countries. When the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968, the plan was to build 2.6 million housing units each year, with 600,000 for low-income families. However, in 1981-1982, President Ronald Reagan stopped funding for public housing and cut rent subsidies for the poor. This caused a shortage of social housing, which dropped from 300,000 homes in 1970 to 3.3 million in 1985. The number of homeless people also increased sharply, including many Vietnam veterans, unemployed people, and children. Although successive administrations tried to tackle some of these problems, housing financing for low-income groups never came close to the previous level. At the end of 2020, the US had an estimated housing shortage of 3.8 million homes. This was largely due to the decline in social housing and private subsidized housing. As millennials reached the age of wanting to buy their first home en masse, rents and house prices rose to record highs, and housing became increasingly difficult to afford, not only for low-income households, but increasingly for middle-income households as well. Although immigration added some pressure to the housing market, it is not correct to say it was the main cause of these problems. The narrative that immigrants are primarily responsible for the housing crisis overlooks the more significant factors at play, such as policy decisions and economic dynamics. Migrant workers, in particular, are disproportionately affected by the current housing issues. They often find themselves excluded from access to social housing and lack additional government support, leaving them with limited options. As a result, many are forced to live in overcrowded apartments, enduring substandard living conditions and paying exorbitant rents to landlords who exploit their precarious situation. Moreover, migrant workers are more vulnerable to homelessness, especially during economic downturns when job security becomes uncertain and affordable housing options diminish further. The lack of social housing exacerbates their plight, pushing them into the fringes of the housing market where they must compete for scarce and overpriced rental units. This precarious situation is not unique to migrants. Non-migrant populations also struggle with the same issues, especially in rapidly gentrifying areas where housing costs skyrocket and availability plummets. The competition for affordable housing creates an environment where both migrants and long-time residents face significant barriers to securing stable and reasonably priced homes, highlighting the need for comprehensive housing policy reforms that address these systemic issues rather than scapegoating immigration. In conclusion, while immigration is often blamed for the soaring housing prices and increasing homelessness in the United States, UK, and Europe, the real culprits lie in government policies and the privatization of the housing market. Since the 1980s, decisions to reduce the stock of social housing, cut subsidies, and remove tenant protections have drastically increased housing costs. The Netherlands, the UK, and the US have all witnessed a significant reduction in affordable social housing, exacerbating the housing crisis and making home ownership a distant dream for many, particularly the younger generation. The sharp decline in social housing stock and government incentives promoting home ownership has led to a vicious cycle of rising rents and property prices, pushing even middle-income families to the brink. Despite common misconceptions, immigration's impact on the housing market is minimal compared to the effects of these policy choices. Addressing the housing crisis requires a comprehensive re-evaluation of housing policies, a renewed commitment to building affordable social housing, and safeguarding tenant rights to ensure that everyone has access to secure and affordable homes. Without such measures, the dream of affordable housing will remain out of reach for many, deepening social inequalities and perpetuating the cycle of homelessness. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you want to read up on this topic, you can find some interesting literature in the description. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe for more thought-provoking content.